My name is Catherine Michaelis, and I am interviewing Alex McGee for Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is February 24th, 2018, and the interview is taking place in Athens, Georgia. So Alex, to start out with, can you tell me what year you were born and where?
I was born July 7th, 1989 in Atlanta, Georgia, so at Northside Hospital.
And have you lived in Atlanta your whole life?
Yes. The only exception is that I came to Athens to go to UGA for undergrad.
So what do you do for a living?
I am an archivist, so my background, I have a master's in history, and then I had done undergrad in history and women's studies. And so I do not, I'm an archivist, let's go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're interested in women's studies, and
Yes,
obviously.
yes, certainly that has informed why I marched, and certainly what my interests are politically.
Mm-hmm. So, can you talk about your family's political leanings?
Yeah, so I was raised by a single mother who is actually really conservative. My brother and I'm a fraternal twin, and my brother and she would joke with us that she failed as a parent and raised two bleeding heart liberals. Because we're pretty far left in terms of our political views and just how we operate. So my uncle, I think some of my cousins are kind of like, they would probably vote Democrat, but it's not something that they really talk about. So Thanksgivings were always like really uncomfortable, especially as I got older. Like my aunt is like super Catholic and then volunteered at crisis pregnancy centers and just would say things at Thanksgiving, like that we just need to teach women to keep their legs closed, when like my personal like research has to do with like abortion laws around abortion and the Supreme Court cases that gave women, access to abortion.
Yeah.
And so it's just real crazy. Yeah. And so I think growing up, I never really thought about politics. I do remember like my mom sent us to a really like hoity-toity daycare, and like it was like the 1990 when was Clinton elected the second time? 96?
That sounds right.
Yeah, and so it was Bob Dole running against him, and so I guess school was closed, so we had gone to this like fancy daycare for the day, and they did like a poll of like, who would you vote for? And obviously these kids were all like young. They're mirroring what their parents were voting, and all these people were like, I would vote Bill Clinton, and then we were like, I mean, Bob Dole's who our mom talks about. And that was like the first realization, like where it's like, okay, so like my mom has this opinion and it seems like other people don't. And then we like told her and she was like, typical. So, and then I think like it was like in high school when I started taking like more history classes. Like I took AP US history and AP European history, and that's when I think I first got like my sense of like, oh, like there's like a lot more. Like I don't think I was a stupid person, but I think like my education hadn't introduced me to these other ideas, and certainly my mom wasn't doing that. Like she would take us to museums. It wasn't that we weren't like exposed to stuff. It was just like my brother and I found it on our own. And so then when I went to college, like I took a women's studies class like pretty early on. Like I think it was like my second semester of undergrad. And I had already started a bunch of history classes and was like pretty into all that. But the women's studies class, it was like something clicked. Like I was just like, oh, here's all the language that I needed to kind of express my opinions, and that they don't align with my mom. So
would you say that's when you started identifying as a feminist?
Yeah, I think so. That's when I probably like was like, yeah, that's the label that I take on. And then from there, like even in undergrad, we had to do like a senior thesis for my history degree, and I wrote about, it was the right to sexual privacy. So it was like looking at like the Supreme Court decisions that had language about like a lot of the arguments that the Supreme Court went with for having access to birth control was that there was this idea in the law that you had the right to be let alone. And so I kind of like took that and ran with that and looked at like birth control, but also like the cases around LGBT people and sodomy laws. And of course Georgia always has a role in these stories.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Real progressive.
Yeah. So and I think like that is where everything really started to come together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that around when you started expressing those sorts of opinions to your mom?
Mm-hmm.
How did that go over?
Oh, yeah. Well, I told you she said
Right.
she failed as a parent.
But do you think she's actually bothered by it, or is she just...
No, I mean, like, she's always been really respectful, and, like, she gets mad at my brother and I for not being respectful of her opinions, which I think we are, but she just gets frustrated because, he and I both have master's degrees, and we were, like, she never went to college. She, like, did very well for herself, but it was, like, based on experience, never that she had a degree. And
What did your mom do?
my mom, so she did a number of things. She worked for Eastern Airlines, and then she wanted to be a flight attendant, but got married and then couldn't be a flight attendant. And she got divorced, like, when divorce was still really taboo, when she was, like, I think 31. And then lived her life, sold real estate, was the first woman realtor in Marco Island, Florida, and had, like, old men, like, trying to, like, sabotage her. Like, she tells some crazy stories, and then, like, came to Atlanta in, like, 1980, and then, like, the real estate market just was, like, trash, so she left that and got into inside sales, and she worked in software sales the rest of her career.
That's really interesting. It seems like those kinds of experiences would have made a feminist out of some people.
Right. So looking back, I'm like, yeah, my mom was a badass. Like, and she raised me to be, like, a really strong woman, to, like, not be put off by men. Like, she told me, she gave me my name because she wanted to make sure I had a name that if I was ever an executive, it would look really great on my desk nameplate. Like, that's, like, something she told me growing up. So it's just, like, really, I just feel like, how do I reconcile, like, that she raised me that way, and then I ended up with these political opinions, and she doesn't get it. But I mean, like, we talk about it, and I think she tells us, I'm glad you guys have opinions. There are so many people that don't feel anything about this, or they don't vote, and I was like, yeah, so it's better than the alternative.
Yeah.
My brother and I do tell her, like, technically we cancel out her vote because we vote the same. But yeah.
Well, that's cool that you guys are able to.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean it doesn't get heated, but yeah.
So, do you support a particular political party?
I mean, I feel like everyone says this, but, like, yeah, I guess I would vote more often than not with a Democratic candidate, but I do not think they are perfect by any means. I have a lot of friends that are super involved with the Democratic Socialists, and I don't think that that's where I align necessarily, but I certainly see that, like, the current two parties we have are, like, pretty deeply flawed.
So, before the Women's March, had you ever been involved in any kind of political activism or activities?
So here at Georgia, like, just from doing my women's studies degree, like, that's a pretty small program. So I was involved with a lot of people that did, like, Take Back the Night marches, Living Wage campaign, Freedom University, but those were things where it's like I would support them, and I would, like, go to fundraisers for them because, like, they would do, or I would help them in that effort. But, like, I know with, like, the Take Back the Night marches, like, I felt like I always had something happening where I couldn't go because it's only one night. But yeah, and I don't think I had ever marched or anything like that before.
You said Freedom University?
Yes. So that's, like, undocumented students that want to get a public education in Georgia. So that was something that was started here at UGA. And now they're still around, but it's like, in theory, you shouldn't be getting a free public or a cheaper public education. You shouldn't be getting in-state tuition as a student if you're undocumented, because technically you're not considered in-state. And so these students, like, share that they are actually undocumented, and they do courses where, so like you can donate money for the books, and I can't remember the professor's name, but there's someone from Georgia that like has been involved from the beginning, and she helps teach the classes. But yeah, they always cause a ruckus at like the state legislature. Yeah.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
didn't know about that. So are your mom or your brother, anybody else in your family involved in political activities?
Not really. No, I mean, like, I think my mom just grew up in a generation where, like, you voted who you vote for, but she used to always be like, you know, it's supposed to be secret. Like, I don't have to tell you who I voted for. And we would just be like, well, we know. And then my brother, he's a political, like, he's a person that follows politics and has lots of opinions, but he's never been one to, like, get involved. And I think, like, I know after Donald Trump's election, I think a lot of people did some soul searching, and that was one thing that he was like, I should be more involved, I should do more, like, even if it's something like talking back to someone who says something super racist or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the march, January 21st, 2017. So for the record, which march did you attend?
I went to the DC one.
Okay, and why did you choose to attend that one in particular?
Well, so it kind of just like happened. I think I knew I was going to go to a march, and originally I was going to go to the Atlanta one, and then they did these buses. It was like some organizers did buses from Atlanta, Athens, Macon, Savannah that were going to take people. Because I think I talked to some other people about like getting plane tickets, and then I kind of waited, and then it was really expensive. So then it was out of the question for me money-wise to be able to go for such a short trip. And so then there was a deal where like if you had like a code, you got a discount, and the more full the buses were, the cheaper it was to go. So it made it where it was like $72 to go or something like that. And I hadn't been on a long bus trip like that ever, and now I probably will never do that again. But so it made it where I was like, oh wow, for that amount of money I should go. I would want to go to DC. And so that's kind of how I ended up going. Like I knew I was going to go to a march, but it was probably like, and then the buses were already full, and then I was like checking every day, and like 2 seats opened up, so my fiance and I went. Yeah. So
why was it important to you to march?
I think there's that really popular image that circulated after the march where it was a woman, and it was 53% of white women voted for Trump. And I don't think anyone that knows me personally would ever think that I was one of those women, but I guess for me, I saw that march as an opportunity to like come out and show up and be like, I did not vote for this person, I do not support this agenda, and like hopefully start something. And so to go at all was my way to show up, even though I feel like in some ways it is a more passive way, like in terms of like long-term sustaining a kind of activism, but yeah.
So what are the issues that are most important to you that motivated you to go?
Just because of my own personal like interests, certainly reproductive rights. I do think that a woman's right to control her own reproduction gives her power. Like if you can say, I don't want to be pregnant right now, like you can do a lot more with your life. And that we know that women they pay a price for having children, they pay a price for the potential to have children. And so there's economics tied up in that as well. Mm-hmm. So we knew like conservatives and Donald Trump, I'm pretty sure everyone was like, wow, they're gonna like get the Supreme Court, they're gonna choose who's gonna be the next justice, and obviously they essentially, they upheld, or they stopped I forget who it was that Obama had nominated, but he had nominated someone for the Supreme Court, and they just were like, we're not gonna do the confirmation hearing. And so like that was at stake, and once that happened, I think a lot of people have lots of reasons to be mad about Donald Trump, but just that my background was like constitutional history, I was like, no, the Supreme Court is really important. Like that is someone who will make decisions that will long outlast Donald Trump's presidency. So that was a really big thing for me. Also, just LGBTQ rights. I think we've made strides, but all of that could be really easily undone if a certain case came before the Supreme Court. I mean, that's how gay marriage got legalized in this country, and it can all go away really easily. Another thing, like just with Donald Trump's campaign, he made a lot of like coded and not so coded racist comments, where I just could not fathom how people were able to look past those and still elect this person. So I was just like pissed all around and really wanted to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common
Yeah.
feeling. Is like a lot of people.
What the fuck?
We didn't realize
Yeah.
this was still here.
Yeah.
This is still going on.
Yeah.
These feelings are still around so
Yeah.
much. But
Yeah, I know, and just like when you look at like modern conservatism, like it started with people talking about like school choice or private property, and then it kind of grew into like where you would hear people talk about like welfare queens. So it was like still couched in this like really coded language,
mm-hmm.
and I feel like with Donald Trump, that like has all been swept away, and now people are just like pretty blatant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty scary.
yeah.
So what were some of the other issues that you saw represented at the march, and do you have any particular opinions about those?
I mean, I saw like healthcare. So obviously, Republicans were repeatedly trying to dismantle Obamacare. That was something that I benefited from when I was in grad school before I had a full-time job. My brother still gets his health insurance through the exchange. And that was because, like, even though my mom had money, and, like, Obamacare allowed us to stay on her health insurance until we were 26, but I turned 26 and then still had a minute. Or no, she went on Medicare because she was eligible for Medicare. My mom's pretty old, or older, I should say. But so she went on Medicare, and we did not have health insurance through her anymore because her employer was like, we don't give you health insurance. Your beneficiaries don't either. So we were able to get health insurance through the exchange, and so even though I got a job, my brother still was getting it. I did not want to see that dismantled. My mom has had cancer twice. She had breast cancer and then colon cancer a couple of years ago. And those are all things where, you know, if the law had been different, she could have really had, like, I saw the bills or it was the statement of benefits, it wasn't a bill, where you just see how much these things cost. And so in a short 10-year span, she had breast cancer, had a hip replacement, and then had colon cancer. So that's hundreds of thousands of dollars each go round.
Yeah.
And so you just, knowing what healthcare costs in this country, and that these people kind of want to take it away. And that was something that they really wanted to do, and I think there was that sense that, like, well, now they have the president, because Obama was the one stopping it before. He wouldn't sign anything if they had successfully passed it. So that was something that I saw a lot. Obviously the Dakota pipeline, just like respecting indigenous rights, immigrants. Obviously Donald Trump ran on a platform saying that they were going to build a dumb wall. You know, I saw like those were things I saw on a lot of signs. And then just also like, you know, pro women.
So I'm curious about the healthcare issue. Did you and your mom talk about that at all when she was sick?
Oh yeah,
from that angle.
And that's one thing that's really interesting to me is that, like, she can see, like, this does matter, and she can relate to it, but, like, there's still, like, a disconnect, and she'll be like, you know, the system we have is broken, like, her talking point is that, like, Obamacare didn't fix it. It wasn't, and to me, I'm like, yeah, I agree. It wasn't perfect. Probably universal health care. And that was one thing that she was like, I think Medicare is great. Like, and I was like, you know, Bernie Sanders ran on a platform of Medicare for all, but, like, even still, she wouldn't go for it, even though I was like, you guys agree.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned earlier some like activities you participated in college.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other kind of protests that you've ever attended? Or?
Not protests. Okay. I don't even know that I've done a march or anything like that.
Okay. So before you went to this march, what were you expecting or hoping to get out of it?
Well, so I went to like a meeting at Morna's house, Morna Gerard's house, and originally, like it was like all these women that were planning to go, and Morna had gone to a meeting where it was basically going over like, what are your rights if you do have a skirmish with law enforcement? How do you handle counter protesters? Like, how should you plan? And so I kind of had it in the back of my mind that like, well, okay, well maybe this could get kind of crazy, which didn't worry me, especially like I was going with Tyler, and so I knew I was gonna have like this 6-foot dude with me, and he would make sure we were okay. But I don't know. I guess I kind of thought, okay, there are tons of people. It's gonna be crazy. I actually went to Barack Obama's second inauguration, which had a similar crush of people. Like, I remember going on getting off the metro and like feeling like I was gonna get trampled because it was just like so many people trying to go one place. So I kind of was like, well, I bet it'll be like that. Just a crazy amount of people, and it wasn't as well organized as the inauguration because they had like, you would go through your corral to get to your assigned section, whereas this was like a mad rush of people everywhere. But so like this meeting at Morna's, I kind of had it in the back of my head, like bring snacks, wear comfortable shoes, like no, you may not be able to go to the bathroom for a really long time. And some of those ladies got really real and they were talking about wearing Depends, and I said, I'm not doing that. Like I'd probably get arrested for public indecency before I wear Depends.
So y'all really got down to brass tacks then.
Like they were, like I said, they were keeping it real, and I think some of them did that, and that's cool. Like I at one point had to go to the bathroom so bad while we were there. So it would have been easier if I was wearing Depends and didn't care, but
it would have been easier for a minute.
But then I would be wearing Depends like for the next 8 hours. So, everyone makes their own choices. I knew what I was doing, so. But yeah, so I kind of had, I prepared for. They talked about what would happen if people approached you from the media and wanted to interview you. So being really thoughtful in how you would present yourself and your opinions if you were given that opportunity. I think because they wanted to make sure you're not that stupid person where they can cut up your interview and you don't sound super enlightened about the issues. So
who was it that told you about that? Was it just somebody, other people who were marching, or?
It was other people at this meeting at Morna's house, where I think Morna had gone to a thing where it was talking about safety in this situation, how to prepare for your own personal safety, and they talked about writing a phone number for the ACLU on your arm and permanent marker, and I didn't do that. And then staying in touch with people, so having a designated meeting spot, that kind of logistics. Didn't end up needing any of it because the day didn't go as planned, so yeah.
So was there anything particular that you were hoping to get out of it as far as emotional experience or just the sort of experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think once it was known that I was gonna go to DC, I kind of was wow, so we're gonna go to the streets, we're gonna be on Donald Trump's front lawn, and it's gonna be the day after the inauguration, so we're probably gonna see some pro-Trump people in our travels, and I don't know, I kind of was ready for a fight, but then I also was no, I hope it'll be a really chill, satisfying experience, and that we were, I think ahead of the march there was a lot of talk about white women needing to step up and show that they aren't going to support Donald Trump, like that we aren't going to fall back on our own privilege as white women in this world. And so there was a lot of talk about like the need for more intersectionality while they were still putting together the final plans. So I really wanted to see that come through.
Do you feel like it did?
Yes and no. I think some of the speakers were really good. Like I don't remember many of the speakers because we weren't close, and so we had like a screen that we could kind of see them, and it would be a lot of people from the crowd being like, "Who is that?" And then someone would be like, "It's so and so," and so like I remember like Ashley Judd, Scarlett Johansson. I remember Alicia Keys singing. And I really remember, like, it was the mothers of, like, Trayvon Martin, and, like, all of those young men who had been, like, gunned down by police wrongfully. And so, like, and that was, like, the most memorable moment. But then it was just, like, they were running really behind schedule, so we were kind of like, oh, Lord, I'm ready to start walking. My feet are getting, like, my feet were falling asleep from standing in the same place for so long. But in terms of, like, the intersectionality, I did see a lot of, like, I saw a diverse crowd, but I also, you know, it's weird that I say that when I'm like, yeah, but I also wanted to see white women show up and, like, own this. Because in that instance, you know, it was kind of frustrating because after Donald Trump was elected, I saw all these people that were, like, my age, that I went to high school with or whatever, where they clearly like lived in their bubble, and they were the ones saying things ahead of the election like, well, they're both bad, they're both just as bad, and then yeah, like, give me a break, like, they're not the same at all. And then like the day after he won, they were the ones freaking out on social media and saying like, how could this happen, this is the worst, and I'm like, you probably voted for goddamn Jill Stein, like, give me a break, I know you, or you didn't go vote at all. So I kind of wanted to see those people like wake up and like show up, because like they're probably the reason they're one of the reasons this election will be studied for a long time by a lot of people, but they're probably one of the reasons why Donald Trump is president right now. So those people needed to have their awakening and show up and be like, fuck this administration, like there needed to be an awakening. So yeah. Yeah.
So how did your mom feel about you going to the march?
So I know, like, ahead of it, we, like, talked about it, like, once, and she was like, okay, oh, well, are you gonna be safe? And I was like, yeah. And then, I was like, you know, and she was asking me, like, what's the reasoning behind it? Like, why are they doing it? And I was like, well, it's like, you know, there are a lot of women that are, like, a little shook by this presidency, and, I think there's a lot of commonalities, like and I told her, like, Bell Hooks talks about meaning in the margins, and, you know, even though we may not have the same life experience, like, we have things that overlap us, like intersectionalities of ourselves, and that's where we can meet, that's where we can find these, like, shared commonalities, and, like, that may be what I was hoping to see at the march, where it's like, you know, we may not agree on everything, but, like, we are powerful when we are together, when we, like, women come together. And like acknowledge that we are fighting a lot of the same battles. And, you know, I told my mom that, and she was kind of like, oh, okay. And then after I came back, I don't remember who, she brought it up, but like, she was like, well, I have to tell you, I saw that photo of that woman with the sign that said 53% of white women voted for Trump, and I was like, that's a factual statement, go on. And she was like, well, I just thought that was really like antagonistic and like kind of divisive.
That was the sign that...
Yeah, right? And I'm just like, what? Like, there were so many other signs, but like, you're mad about something that is like a factually true thing. Like, you are sensitive to the fact that like, that is a thing. I don't know.
Did your mom vote for Trump? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I assumed.
I wonder if my mom will ever listen to this. But she actually said, God, I remember this. My brother and I were like, oh my God. She said that she didn't want people to know that she voted for Trump. that she was afraid she would get attacked. Because I don't know if you remember, but like right after the election, there were like posts on both sides of people saying that they were like, had like notes left on their cars or were like yelled at while driving, where like,
Oh, I didn't know about that.
yeah, and so my mom said she was like really afraid that people would like do something to her, and so I love my mom a lot, but no,
Mom's gonna mom.
mom's gonna mom.
So were your other friends and family supportive of your going?
Yeah, I mean like so I don't know, like my brother in terms of my family was supportive. One of my cousins, on my mom's side, I did a post like the day before I left, where I had done my sign, and then I posted on Facebook and Instagram where I was like, you know, I'm really lucky I'm going to go to DC, and if you want me to write your name on my sign, like I see that I'm privileged and that I can make this trip, and maybe you can't go for whatever reason, but like I did on the back of my sign, why I march, and then I said, if you want your name like on it, tell me and I'll put it on there. So I ended up having like over 100 people like put their names on it, and like it was really sweet. There were people that like I worked with when I was at UGA, where we've kept in touch via social media, but like one woman, like she was like, have put my name on my two little girls, like that's amazing. And so one of my cousins did say, like, oh, put me. But I also had a cousin who unfriended me after the election, so.
Have you guys talked since?
No. She unfriended me on Facebook and Instagram, and my brother, who wasn't even involved in it. And, like, she's not coming to my wedding.
Oh.
I even told my mom, like, oh, she's not coming to the
Oh,
wedding.
you mean you're not inviting her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She's not getting an invite, yeah. So,
yeah, well.
yeah, but like my friends were all really supportive, and like a lot of them were like, put my name on your sign. And then I had friends that marched in Atlanta, so yeah.
So you said you went with your fiance.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go with anybody else?
Nope, that was it. We were lucky to get 2 spots. Initially, the group of ladies that were gonna wear, some of them were gonna wear Depends. They were like, we were gonna meet up with them, but then our bus was like to DC for a lot of reasons, but we didn't get there in time to meet up with anyone. And then like one of my good friends, she was my roommate in college, she lives in DC, and so we were also going to meet up with her, and we never were able to meet up with her. So it was Tyler and I, and then occasionally people from our bus that we would find. But yeah.
So then you and Tyler are on the same page politically?
Thankfully so. Yeah, I don't think we'd be getting married if we weren't. Yeah.
So when we left off, you were talking about that you marched with your fiance.
Okay, yeah.
And so can you talk about your fellow marchers? Just everybody you saw while you were there?
Yeah. So we got there, and we took this bus, and it was running late, and so we got there, and it was like 10:30 in the morning, when we originally were going to get there at like 6:30 in the morning. So we were just already running late, and they made all the buses park over at like the stadium. I think it's like RFK Stadium. So it was like a decent couple miles away from where the march was happening, and so like most people were walking, and Tyler and I hopped on some city bikes, which was a great idea until it wasn't. Because we got over there, and like the corrals where you turn in the bike to stop like your time were all full. So we were then like riding around looking for a place to return the bikes.
Stuck with the bikes.
And then there was one where we found where they were like, they had like city, like they're not city bikes, they're a DC bike or something like that, but they had like employees letting you like turn in the bike so it would stop, and then they were taking the bikes out and putting them over somewhere else so people could turn them in. So that kind of put us away from a lot of the people that we had been on the bus with. And then I really needed to go to the bathroom, like so bad. So then we were like kind of like walking around, and we like ran into this family, and it was like a mother, a grandmother, and then like probably like, I think she said she was 9. but like a 9-year-old girl, and they were also looking for a bathroom. And so we like saw a porta potty outside of these like soon to be very expensive townhouses, and there was like some workmen in there, and we were like, you guys cool if we use this porta potty? And then like some elderly couples came up too, and they were wearing like, I don't remember what they were wearing, but it was like football paraphernalia, which like the next day the Falcons played, and this was like the year they went to the Super Bowl. So like Tyler was like talking to them about sports, and they were talking like, you know, football. And so those were like two really like interesting experiences, because then we were talking to these people and we were like helping them because they had never been to DC, and so I had a better sense of where we were, so we like helped them get to the march. And by then they had closed the gate that we had originally wanted to go to. So we were further back in like the crowd of people, and you know, we were just around, like I was amazed at how many kids there were there. Like that was something that was unexpected, because obviously like the women that I was at that meeting with, they were like, here's what happens if the police try and get in your face, and like if you see counter protesters. And so like when I saw kids, I was like, oh, okay, well things aren't gonna get too crazy if there are kids here. Like I just don't see that happening. But it was a lot of frankly, a lot of white people, a lot of white women. I saw a lot of elderly people, like, and maybe that was just where, because we were in the, like, I showed up late part of the section, you know? We weren't there with but then there were, like, young people. As there was a woman wearing, like, a costume where it was, like, she clearly had made it, and she was just, like, a human-sized vagina, which that was, like, pretty hilarious. But there were like dads with their like kids. So it was just I was impressed to see that it was like kind of a family affair, I guess, if you were local enough to do it. And I wasn't expecting that. Yeah.
So you said that you took a bus from Atlanta.
Yep.
Did you guys just bus all night and then get back on the bus and come home, or did you?
Yep, that was how. So it was intended like we were gonna get on the bus at like 9:30 Friday night, and so we got on the bus and we had snacks and we had our signs, and like I was there were two nuns behind us on the bus, like, so it was like a really interesting mix.
Did you talk to many of the people on the bus with you?
Yeah, and like not a lot of people like went to sleep like almost immediately, because I think they knew like the next day was going to be really crazy. But we stopped, and that would be at the rest stop where you would like make chit chat and everything like that. And I know like the morning as we were like in traffic trying to get into DC, I was like, oh shit, let me just put some light like BB cream on and like some mascara. And so I made Tyler like hold the tiny little mirror so I could do my mascara, and these nuns were like, that's love. That is love. And so that was pretty funny. And then another woman had made buttons for people to like buy, and then she was going to donate the money. I think it was to like the cost for them, like, you know, they were asking for money to pay for the fees associated with like getting porta potties for the march and all, so they were going to donate the money towards that. And so there was one button, they were like, well, there's no one else who will buy this button on our bus, so she gave it to him, and it was a button that said, dudes who support ladies who support ladies. So so he got that for free.
Was Tyler the only man on the bus?
He was, yeah. And so he got a lot of extra attention, I think, because of that, because they were just like, you're a good guy. But so like we would talk to them that like when that kind of stuff would happen. What was the original question though?
Did you talk to people on the bus?
Oh yeah, okay, so yeah, I did. But then like on the way back, it was we got on and they were showing like the news coverage of all the marches, and like people were like really amped, like cheering, and then they showed Donald Trump talking about his inauguration, saying, you know, oh, it was record-breaking attendance for his inauguration, and everyone was like booing. So
what were your feelings while you were marching?
Well, so at first it was like it felt like we were waiting and there were just like so many people.
How long were you guys actually there before you started marching?
We probably were standing there for like 3 hours because they were like running behind schedule on all the speakers. And so, and then we were trying to like see if we could get a better view, so we would like shuffle around, and then, so it was just like waiting, and then finally, I think people got really, like where we were, they were tired of waiting, so then they wanted to start marching. So it was probably like 2 o'clock when the marching started. When originally it was like gonna be like at 1, maybe even earlier than that. But so, and then when we started getting to move more, because it was like you were just packed in. So then when we started getting to move more, we got to see more signs, and then like people were chanting, and that was really cool, because it was just seeing all these people, and we're kind of all on the same page because we're there in that moment in time. And there were a lot of like fuck Trumps, and I can't remember, there was one chant that was like really filthy that I loved. I just thought it was hilarious, but I can't remember it.
So, do you remember any other signs that you liked especially?
There was one that it was, and this is me because I like pop culture, but it was Donald Trump's approval rating 32%, Paul Blart, the Mall Cop's Rotten Tomatoes rating 33%. And so I just thought that was hilarious. Yeah. You know, there were a lot of like, you know, a woman's place is in the House and the Senate and all that, which that's cool. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of little girls, like I saw kids with signs, and those were all cute because they were like squibbly, you know. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of pro-choice ones. I'm trying to remember any more specific ones. There was one and it was like, women didn't come from Adam's rib, you came from my vagina. And so I was like, okay, that works. But yeah, like, the Paul Blart one was like by far my favorite though. Yeah.
So what about after the march? How did you feel then?
Like immediately after? Mm-hmm. So then it was like a come down. So we had to like, we hadn't eaten, and so we were starving. We got food. We actually we stumbled upon Samantha Bee's bus, like from TBS and The Daily Show, and Tyler's someone who like never meets a stranger, and in this crazy scenario of like there are thousands of people around us, this woman comes off Samantha Bee's bus, and it's someone he knows from working at King of Pops.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and she had been a slinger for King of Pops and had moved to New York to be a writer for Samantha Bee's show, and she saw him and was like, Tyler? So she gave us t-shirts that said like feminist and like silver foil, like, so that was really cool. And then we went and hit up Popeyes on the way back to the bus, and then like we got on the bus and everyone's like watching the news coverage. And like, I think people were like at that point you're like kind of running on adrenaline. Like we were like, hell yeah, we did this. Like we made it back to the bus, and then within like 30 minutes, everyone I think fell asleep because I don't know who slept well the night before for the most part.
Were you able to sleep on the bus?
I did. I think I was exhausted because we were on our feet all day, and didn't meet up with anyone as we had planned. It was just like exhausting. I don't remember. My Apple Watch died while we were out, like, so I have no idea of how many steps I actually got. But yeah, it was exhausting, and so I managed to fall asleep, and I like woke up at like 6, and then our bus got back at, it was like 7 in the Whole Foods parking lot on Ponce. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said that you didn't really get to hear any of the speakers while you were there?
Not really. Like, it was just hard to hear, like, the way the speaker was positioned. So, like, it ended up where you would see someone, like, on the screen, but you would be like, everyone would be like, what are they saying? And then you would hear people further up cheering, and you'd be like, all right, it must have been something good. Yeah.
Did you see many police officers while you were there?
I only saw one, and it was like where we were kind of standing when the speakers were going, and then like as people started marching, he was on top of like a cop car, like, and he clearly was enjoying like life, because he was like dancing and like directing people, and like he just seemed pretty cool, and he was like, yeah, ladies, and like, I mean, it wasn't what I expected from a cop that day.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's really my only
who's had
one.
that kind of story.
I know, right? And I just like remember being like, okay, but I, for various reasons, have a feeling he probably didn't vote for Donald Trump. So yeah.
So did you see any opposition protesters?
I didn't actually, and I know they were there, but I didn't.
It doesn't sound like there were all that many, just from the stories I've heard.
I talked to one person, the person I interviewed today. She's the first person that said she saw opposition protesters. Yeah.
Did you see anybody who looked like had come for the inauguration?
Oh yeah, well that was like after we like left, we had dispersed and we're at Popeyes. You know, you saw the "Make America Great Again" hats, and yeah.
So what did you think about the coverage of the march in the media?
You know, I think it was kind of weird because it was like happening right as like Donald Trump was saying his inauguration was the most attended of all time and just broke records, and then he was kind of like, I know when we got on the bus they were like, why are they giving him any attention, like when we've had all these marches all over the country, and like I think they, like, a lot of the women wanted to see some sort of immediate reaction from him, and I can't remember if he like tweeted or not that day, but like I don't know. But then I felt like it kind of got like lost in the news cycle of like, oh shit, like Donald Trump's president, what happens now, you know? But yeah, I like, honestly, because of how I was on this bus for 15 hours before and 15 hours after the march, I feel like I was like a black hole, you know? And then I emerged and it was Sunday, so.
So since you were only a group of two, you and Tyler, I guess you guys probably didn't have any trouble staying together?
No, yeah, I think that helped us a lot, is that we were only two, like, and we initially had plans to meet up with other people, but like no one had cell service and we didn't get there on time, so there was like slim to no chance. We got really close to meeting with people at Popeyes and then it didn't happen, but.
Did you guys make any kind of plan for in case you got separated?
Yeah, you know, there was an app that they were telling people on the bus to download where it was like, even if you didn't have cell service and weren't able to text, like it was a messaging app based on your like immediate location. So like you could be 25 feet away from someone and still be able to send a message. But I think we both knew like, all right, we were just like, we're not gonna lose sight of each other, and also we love each other, so we held hands at times. So yeah, so we were pretty close. Yeah.
So are there any other particular moments that you haven't talked about yet that stand out to you from the day?
I'm trying to think.
Anybody you met or?
Well, I talked about those people with the bathrooms, and that was like the first kid I saw where I was like, oh wow. So when we were leaving like the march area, we marched down kind of like over to where Trump's new hotel was, and a lot of people were leaving their signs there. And then we walked back down towards the Capitol, and while we walked by the Capitol and all the cars parked there, it was like quiet street by that point, and all the cars had like flyers on the windshield, and they were saying like, warning, a sexual predator has moved into the area, and it was like handmade flyers and it was Donald Trump's face. And we definitely took one because that was amazing. I took photos of it too, so happy to donate those. Yeah. But yeah, that was hilarious. And Tyler, there were a lot of people just like leaving their signs by trash cans, I guess, because they didn't want to like carry them back or take them back to wherever they were going. So like Tyler took some. I felt like he shouldn't, but he did. And so yeah. But no, the sexual predator thing was probably like my favorite thing outside of the march. It was hilarious. And you just saw like blocks with just all of the cars had this on it.
So, did you feel emotional at any time during the march, or?
You know, I feel like I'm not usually a super emotional person. Like I felt very like excited to be there, but I didn't get like teared up like some people like really were moved to tears. You know, I think it was really amazing that like I got to share that with Tyler, and for me there was this like moment of appreciation where I'm like, wow, like I'm marrying someone who would do this crazy awful bus ride with me and go out and be one of the men among these thousands of people. And so that like thinking about that, there was like a moment where I was like, I'm so glad he's here, like wow.
Was he as excited about going as you were, or was he sort of doing it for you?
No, I think he was more excited about like what were our signs gonna say and all that, and so he was like pretty into the idea of being like fuck Trump, like that was what he really wanted to do. I think it was a bonus that like I was like, yeah, I'm down, let's go.
Oh, I completely forgot to ask.
Yeah.
Did you carry signs, and what did
Oh
they say?
yeah. So I did. So my sign, it was like a lot of hashtags. Basically, it was like trans rights or human rights, pro-choice. Like I can't remember how I worded everything, but it was just like all like probably a sign that you will hate doing the metadata for because it's just like all these things. So it was like every issue, water is life, you know. Yeah. And then on the back I did the Why I March, where I wrote everyone's names. And then Tyler made a flag. He took an American flag, and then he sewed the letters "Not My President" on it. And we flew it outside our house for a couple weeks after the inauguration. So, and then like he picked up a sign that said "Rise Up," which he was like, "Wow, like the Falcons say that. I want this sign." And that was one that was by the trash, I feel like I should say. And then another one was one of those punny kind of signs about Donald Trump's hair. Yeah. But I don't remember what it said. Yeah.
So you said that on the bus trip home, everybody was pretty much just conked out.
Yeah, like I know I fell asleep finally. Like I did not sleep well the night before, and I slept most of the time. Like didn't even get up like when they stopped for a bathroom break or anything like that.
So is there anything else you want to say about the trip home, or is that pretty much it?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, okay. I was like asleep the whole time.
So how did you feel the day after the march?
So I saw my mom actually the day after the march, and that's when she was like, I saw this sign, and that was very divisive. But I definitely came back and like had a lot of like friends that were like, wow, like they had marched in Atlanta. And so we were kind of going back and forth talking about how amazing it was and like how encouraging it was to see all these other people out there with us. Like it's like I'm not alone and thinking like all of this is bullshit. But I'm also like really cautious because I think like, you know, it's easy to show up right now, but like, will you show up when it matters? So.
Yeah, so what do you... It's been a while since the march happened.
Yeah.
How have you been feeling about everything since?
Well, heavy sigh. You know, I think it's hard to believe it's been a year because it feels like it's been so much longer than a year. And I feel like the amount of shit that I feel like every week there's like 3 things that normally would be like it for a presidential like term for most people, like in terms of like scandals, in terms of like crazy things said, and it's just like you have whiplash because you are mad about one thing and then another thing happens and then you're like, God damn it, like what? And you know, and that's just like our new norm. It's exhausting, and I'm very fortunate in that I do sometimes like just opt not to listen. Like I used to listen to the like NPR every morning while I was driving to work, and then when I would leave work, And like, I probably haven't done that in a while, just because the news cycle just gets me. I'd rather do it on my terms when I want to read the news.
Where do you get most of your news?
Oof, I'm the worst. I get it on Facebook. I mean, like, I follow like the New York Times, you know, Washington Post, but you know, I think it's just like exhausting, and then I worry that a lot of people get burnt out. Like, that same enthusiasm that was there for the march, like, you get run down when there's so much shit to be mad about every week, or so many things that people took for granted suddenly are in quite like, will that be a thing? So like, you know, Obamacare had so many things that it gave us where the Republicans want to undo it. Also, like the birth control mandate, health insurance until you're 26, you know, having caps on what keeping insurance companies from putting a maximum limit on what they would cover. You know, those are things that we've had for a while now and take for granted, but like, obviously could be done away with so quickly. You know, the tax reform was something that they've been saying they want to do for a long time, and I kind of was like, well, I haven't done much else, and then they did it. So, yeah.
So since you've been back from the march, have you been participating in any kind of political action last year?
Not really. For me, it's more like I kind of take action in my own personal life in terms of like when people say stuff, like even at work, like if people say things that I think are inappropriate for whatever the reason, racist, sexist, whatever, I think it's really important to like challenge that and not like let them think that that's ever appropriate in the world we live in. In terms of like my own, I mean, I did go do some stuff for John Ossoff, I guess. I'm not in his district, but I did go do.
What did you do?
So he was having like an event, like where it was like get people out to register to vote in the district, and so Tyler and I went and we brought King of Pops to like get people to come and get a free popsicle. So, and they gave us a shirt, the Vote Your Ass Off shirt. So yeah. But yeah, like that's really like, I mean, that's probably the only political thing. I just feel like we haven't had much locally where it's been like, oh guys, rally, like we've got to do this. Like that was it. And then like we had the mayoral election in Atlanta, which that was its own thing. But you know, that's on a different scale. I think this year will be really interesting, and probably I will put my money where my mouth is in terms of like getting out to support, you know, candidates, because we've got the midterms, we're gonna have a governor race, so that's not this year, that's next year.
That's this year.
It
yeah.
is there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jeez. Oh right, because yeah, we're in a new year. That's right. Okay. I'm still like adjusting to it being 2018. But yeah, so like those are all things where I think like that'll be like this will be a chance for a lot of us to step up and like we can make a difference right now. We could, like if we change things in the midterms, that can undo a lot of what Donald Trump can do with the rest of his time. Yeah.
Cool. So do you feel like the movement in general has maintained momentum?
Yeah, they've been doing the Power to the Polls thing. That's like the most recent thing that I've seen, like the Women's March, like those folks doing. That's like kind of a national push. They actually were like, I'm in Capitol View, and they did an event in Adair Park, which is like blocks from my house, but I was on vacation. I would have been there otherwise, but it was already booked like months ago. So, and that's, but I think like I said, you know, I think a lot of people could get burnt out. Like it's hard being mad all the time. And then like, I don't want people to like have been mad all this time, and then when it actually like no, we need you to like go be knocking on doors and getting people, making sure everyone's registered to vote and that they are going to go vote. Like I want to give people rides to go vote if that's a thing. Like, I'm happy to do that, and that's what I hope people see, that like that's a very concrete thing we can all do to help change things. So.
So, looking to the future
Mhm.
for the rest of Donald Trump's term, however long that is,
Mhm.
what do you hope will happen? Like, best case scenario?
Best case scenario is that I don't think it's real. I don't at this point think that he will be impeached. I just feel like that won't happen with the way Congress is right now. I think best case scenario, we pick up some pretty significant gains in the midterms, and then Congress is kind of able to like stifle a lot of the batshit crazy things that he would want to do. You know, we already know he's a bit of a hypocrite. He'll probably still do executive actions, even though they all trashed Obama for relying on that too much. So I don't think like we would stop everything, but I also don't, like, he's not super politically savvy, so if he doesn't have the support in Congress, that at least would slow his roll significantly. And then like I really believe that like I think there are a lot of young women, or women in general, but a lot of young women that saw the Women's March or were in it themselves, and I hope that they choose to run, because I think it comes down to we need more women in politics, because we let men run the show, and like that they are still a majority when they're not for the population. So you know, I think that's really important, and I'm really encouraged because like, what is it, like Emily's List, and I can't remember the one, and that's local to Georgia, but I heard
Georgia win list.
Yeah, where they had to turn people away because they had, or turn women away because they had too many. They were all full.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as like super encouraging, and like already, I think it was last November that there was the trans legislature, or for the state legislature, and like Gwinnett, where a trans person won in Georgia. And like Gwinnett's not a place that I ever looked at as being like super progressive, so like that's cool. Like that's something where I'm like, okay, well that's some like positive change that like has an effect of more than just like a day. So I definitely think like looking for my best case scenario is that we see more women running for seats, and then take back at least one of the houses. Preferably both.
So, this is just kind of something that I've been wondering about. What do you think the connection is between the Me Too movement and like women sort of deciding to more like run?
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually the other day. Or running for office. Well, I think Me
sort
Too
of taking their power back.
Right, and so I think the whole Me Too thing is really interesting because it's like for a long time women have like kind of like they felt like to complain about this kind of stuff, like whether it's like sexual harassment or like sexual assault or rape or whatever it is, that there was a too big of a price to pay for coming forward. And I think like the Me Too movement has kind of shown that like no, like you can be pretty powerful. Like Harvey Weinstein is like a really great example of like he was revered in Hollywood and like apparently did this for years but was untouchable. And like a couple brave women stepped forward and told their story, and that like has encouraged other women to come forward as well. And it shows that, like, no, this doesn't exist in a bubble. Like, you will pay. Like, and you should. Like, there are repercussions for your actions no matter who you are. And certainly, I think, like, with men in power, like, there has been this climate of, like, well, I'm a powerful person. I have money, a position that puts me in a position of authority over you. Like, there are no repercussions. I don't pay the price for what I do, and this this has shown that yes, like there are, but then also if we have women in positions of power, then like hopefully that's changing the conversation too. Like I think looking at the tech world is also a really interesting place to see where that's like all kind of coming to the forefront. And I was listening to something on the radio the other day, and they were talking to the female CEO of Stitch Fix.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying that like for when they do like a request for proposal, an RFP for services for something, they have like a bunch of questions where it's like, how many women are in executive positions for your company? What's the percentage? What kind of percentage is that? And so she was like, you know, that doesn't come down to like a determining factor, but it makes people say like, well, okay, how many do we do, and why is it that way? So even just using, like, she's using her position as like someone of a CEO of a prominent company that has some money to spend to force people to have these conversations and think about that and what are the implications, and like having to explain it.
That's interesting because I mean that's something that would really like if it really starts to affect people's bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Really think about it. Yeah. And so like I just heard that this week and I was like, that is like such a good idea. Like where it's like, that's a great example of like not something like you're not marching in the streets, but just like a small tweak of some paperwork can start a conversation that like wasn't happening really before.
You just have to think to do it. I mean what you were saying about like the men sort of being like an untouchable, powerful man, like having money and being in a position. I mean, I kind of feel like Trump is sort of the epitome of
well, and
so
that's one thing that like my mom and I always get into it because she was like, well, Democrats love Bill Clinton, and I was like, well, I was a child, so I don't defend Bill Clinton, but I just think like you're right, Donald Trump is like the epitome of like, here he can have all these people come forward, and yet the dude got elected president. And like what kind of message does that send? And like it's like peak hypocrisy.
All right, so we kind of talked about your like glass half full scenarios in terms of the next couple years. So what do you fear might happen? What's your glass half empty?
Someone on the Supreme Court dies, because I don't think any of the more liberal judges will choose to retire right now. So if one of them dies, that would suck, because then that means Donald Trump has another nominee that he can get appointed. That's like I really do think the Supreme Court is like super important, and I think a lot of people like don't think about that as much. Certainly, you know, I think worst case, the midterms don't go well, Donald Trump gets elected for another term, and has more time to like stir up trouble. The wall gets built. Like there are so many bad things. But yeah, I don't know. Like, but it's hard. I'm trying not to like think about that, because like this week has been really, I guess the last 2 weeks, just since the Parkland shooting, I feel like it's been really interesting to see how like this is different than it has been for other school shootings. I feel like because these kids are so eloquent and well spoken in terms of stepping up and being like that, with that one quote where it was like, you know, you're the adults, we're the kids, like you should be handling this. And I feel like school shootings and like gun violence, like that is like a parent's worst nightmare, and it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. You do not want your children should be going to a safe place to get their education, and you would hope you would never have to worry about that. And so like that Marco Rubio town hall the other day with the dad who, like, I don't know if you saw that, but that was just a really fascinating exchange where he was kind of pushing Marco Rubio on like, why won't you ban the sale of certain guns, like who's paying you, like that was kind of the unspoken thing, or like and then yesterday, you know, all these people are pushing companies that had business connections to the NRA to like sever those ties, and like I saw a list where they were like crossing out the names as they went. So, you know, I think it just feels like kind of different in that people are saying there's a bottom, like if it hurts their bottom line, then why would they want to do it? You know, and one thing I know, when Donald Trump was elected, they talked about how he had like his business council where it was like Elon Musk and Tim Cook from Apple and all these executives, and they were like, they'll be the ones to like hopefully moderate like crazy shit, because at the end of the day people do care about making money. So I don't know, I fear a lot of stuff, but I really don't want, I want to believe that I don't, like it'll be okay, and that now we only have, you know, what, I guess it's almost March, so 8 more months until the midterms. And they'll take a summer recess at some point.
Yeah.
So like, let's just like
Run out that clock.
run that clock out, because then they're gonna like be like, no, now I need to focus on getting reelected. Yeah.
So do you have any particular strategies that you use to sort of not get burned out and stay, you know, kind of stay focused? And
Well, I kind of talked about like I have stopped listening to the news a lot, and I think that's more just because it bums me out to like hear like just whatever crazy things happening with Donald Trump, and like, who did he tweet this morning, and then I would go into work in like a really bad mood, not like mean, but just like, whoa, like the world. So I definitely like have pulled back on that, like, because it's very easy to have 24-hour news consumption, and like kind of giving myself that space to like decompress from it sometimes. But I also know like when the opportunity comes up for volunteering with like various election campaigns, like that'll be like where I will put some man hours in, because like I feel like that's concrete. I know people that volunteer and are like they escort people going to get abortions or reproductive services, whatever, so that they don't feel threatened by like counter protesters. Like that's another, I feel like, really great way to like put your energy into something really positive and like fruitful. That isn't so much like arguing with someone in the comments of an article somewhere. That's another thing, don't read the comments on Facebook ever. Like it's just like the worst, and you forget, it's easy to forget that, like, I don't know, or just I don't want to know that people say those things. Like I know they do, but I don't need to know what they say. Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for anyone who's thinking about going to a march like this one in the future?
Yeah, I would say do it. You know, I probably could have prepared better. I didn't bring as many snacks as I did, but I think there's something really powerful in seeing that you aren't the only person, and that you aren't alone, and like that, like DC was really interesting because there were people that came from all over, not just the eastern seaboard of the United States. There were people that came from all over to march, and I want to believe that like people left there inspired and like ready to like go fight some battles, you know, and turn Congress. Let's get it back. Like, but you know, we went and you're at that march knowing you have a while still. But yeah.
Was there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
No, I feel like I talked a lot. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.